The clear skies of a beautiful city. A broken section of railing on the roof of a high-rise. What happened? Two girls go flying down from the roof, hugging each other. They fell straight to the asphalt and blood splattered in different directions. A large moon of blood began to flow from their bodies. They were lying in each other's arms. And one of them got hit on the skin and the head. The one from below was quietly crying out in pain with glassy eyes. The other lay next to her and looked at her. The ambulance was traveling at a high rate of speed. These girls were quickly taken to the nearest city hospital. Workers quickly told the doctor information about the victims: 33 years old Lee Yuri, 23 years old Lee Yul. These two fell from a 10-story building and caught on a tree before falling. The doctor yelled for everyone to get ready for surgery. They started giving them electric shocks to save their lives. The two girls lay unresponsive to manipulation and the strength of the discharge was increased to 200. There was still no pulse. Suddenly the native pulse line shuddered. And one of the girls opened her eyes wide. The nurse said the patient's awake. Next to the waking girl's bed stood the entire family. The girl didn't realize what was going on. Who are these people? Thought the girl as she looked at the concerned faces beside the bed. She breathed heavily and tried to gaze into the faces that stood and waiting for her. Suddenly she jumped up in a panic. What? That woman. An excited thought ran through her head. You're the chairman's youngest daughter, grabbed the girl's hair and screamed unintelligibly in panic. The elevator arrived at the assigned floor. A cute girl with beautiful eyes walked into the room and said hello to the office workers. They didn't know who she was or what she was doing here. In another corner of the office, someone shouted sternly, Yunji. A department head reprimanded an employee for not checking the schedules on a report. The employee said that another girl was responsible for it and the supervisor only got angrier and angrier. And that's your excuse? In the other side, one worker was asking another about the interview payment. Did you take care of it, Sagyun? The girl didn't understand what he was talking about. The girl said that Lee Yuri is also doing it. The man started to get nervous. Yunji, you don't know either? The girl replied that she hadn't heard of this task at all. Another office worker had already asked the supervisor if she knew which university the conscripts would attend. The woman was extremely surprised that he asked her. Then who should I ask? The man asked nervously. Minji replied that he should look at the task list on his own. The man with the glasses said that she was listed behind the task. Minji shamelessly asked only who had thought of making the list like that. The man got angry and started yelling at Minjin, do you have some problem? The two men were burning with hatred for each other and the other two workers had to court the conflict that had developed. The girl with the beautiful eyes was quietly watching. A couple of workers behind her were also shocked at what was happening. They had a problem? Because it's usually the lawyer who decides these things, right? They must have had some problems with the survival. The workers were talking amongst themselves behind the girl's back. While the man with glasses was getting angry, Minji started calling somewhere from her work phone. Ms. Yoon, you know there's a training going on right now, right? I apologize for not telling you sooner, but the situation was. The female employee spoke quickly. Where will the training take place now? Interrupting her, Yoon asked. She opened the gates to hell. He, why is that so funny? Quietly giggled the girl. She wanted to come here again. She shuffled her feet and suddenly stopped. She saw someone in the office hallway. She touched the Yunji worker's shoulder with her finger. Check the names on the list of the first batch of interviewees, update the list of accounts, and then draft the payment. She whispered in the employee's ear. Yunji looked at the unknown girl and understood nothing. Suddenly, Lee Yul snatched the phone and greeted Ms. Yuna. You must be the head of human resources at For Example Mart, Ms. Yoon Sulmi? Yoon Sulmi, right? You must know how many people are here. With a smile on her face, Lee Yul babbled. Please help us. In exchange, we'll report you to the supermarket. Yes, thank you very much. With a businesslike smile, Lee Yul resolved the matter. Everyone was shocked. Lee Yul handed the phone back and clearly told the plan of action to the employee who was still sitting in the chair. The employee couldn't say a word because of her surprise. Sir, approve the project loaded by Yunsen and call the finance department. Businesslike Lee Yul spoke while pointing her finger. The elderly man was shocked and tried to ask who this girl was that was now pointing so much to everyone. And in response, she said it was all necessary to make it fast so that payment could be made today, and the man dutifully agreed. And he started calling Mr. Lee. Draft for payment of interview fee has been uploaded. Please take care of it as payment is due today," said the employee. "Finally, I'll message the director Lee, don't do that." A business matter was being handled. Lee Yul started running away from the office after that. The employee was trying to convey to Mr. Lee the importance of the task at hand, while he was enthusiastically telling him about what teenagers post on the internet. But he said he would do it after lunch because he wanted Mr. Kim to worry a little. Lee Yul just walked up to these two and said menacingly, "And I like your plan, Mr. Lee." Mr. Lee was very frightened and Lee Yul introduced herself as Junior Sister Lee Hyung. And if he didn't approve of it now, he'd report it to his sister. She looked them straight in the eye. Having done the deed, the girl quietly went in the other direction, leaving these two alone with their conscience and work tasks. Meanwhile, back at the office, everyone was actively discussing the process to accomplish tasks and that some were already ready. Lee Yul walked briskly down the office corridor waving her arms. "This is huge. Maybe I should do this. I can talk to people however I want if they annoy me," the girl thought cheerfully. "What if they get mad? They won't dare to cross the chairman's daughter." Lee Yul thought cheerfully and only her face gave away her cunning plan. The elevator arrived on the 10th floor. A woman came out of it looking around. She saw Ms. Yul and the girl said hello to Sejin Yoon. Yoon asked what Yul was doing here and the girl excitedly searched for something to say. Yoon literally started to carry Yul away, saying that the driver had been waiting for her for a long time and she should go. "I'm wondering, who is she? She's Lyle? No wonder she looks familiar," thought the two senior staff members. Yul and Yuri know each other? That's why they were on the roof together at that moment? Two junior staff members were discussing. She doesn't seem to know about the lawyer. "Everyone, watch your mouths." This was her workplace. A now deceased employee named Yuri. Gorgeously delicate and graceful room. On the floor of the pink room were sweets, all that sweet stuff. "This is heaven," giggled Lee Yul happily. Lying among the sweets on the pink carpet of his equally pink room. Suddenly she remembered something. "You said the overseas coach hasn't been determined yet." She remembered the supervisor yelling at Yoonji in the office this morning. "No one seems to know about the recruitment process for overseas trainers, and I have no internet access, so I cannot check my email," pondered the girl with a serious look. Suddenly, someone knocked on her room. Lee Yul said it's fashionable to enter. Yes. It was one of the house workers and she asked if the young lady needed anything. Lee Yul sat elegantly on the floor in front of the sweets and channeled with a smile that she didn't need anything. Suddenly she told Kim she had a request and asked her to tell her everything. Lee Yul tried to be as cute as possible, just like a kitty cat who needs something. "Can I use the internet for just 5 minutes? Kim tried not to look at Lord's pleading face and said firmly, "I can't fulfill that request." Lee Yul kept asking, "I won't look at anything but my mail. Please." "Okay? Can I?" Kim tried to ignore her. Kim led the young mistress into an office with a computer. The chairman doesn't like people who enter his office without permission. Sitting down on the couch at that time was Kim. Saying that, she tried to look straight ahead and not at Lee Yul. Lee Yul was nervous and embarrassed. So she said again that she'd make it quick. Lee Yul quickly went to her email account and found the emails about recruiting coaches. Lee Yul realized that it was all rejected, but she was glad that she was answered. "I have to report this to Human Resources." "How?" the girl wondered. In thought, she began tapping her fingers on the surface of the table. "He was a prosecutor. Does Hyo Sunwi know him? Well, the difference in age is big." Thought Yul, looking at the rejection message. "Should I call him? Or not?" Still hesitant, she picked up the phone. She convinced herself that this was the right decision and this was her chance. "I didn't get promoted because I was busy doing my own thing. It's time to solve the problem. I'll give a brilliant performance, Lee Yul," thought Lee Yul, imagining herself at work. And dialed a number. The other side of the phone answered. Kim immediately wanted to interrupt this amateurishness of the young mistress. The girl said, "Hello, this is Lee Yul." "What? Who the hell is she?" They answered her and the girl couldn't understand why this man was so rude. Was it because he was a prosecutor? And the girl remembered her recent tantrum. Was it because I was so angry the other day? Lee Yul smiled and asked what the prosecutor was doing today. Jeonju, a police station, and a beautiful warm day. In the interrogation room sat 2 police officers and the perpetrator, who signed that he was not guilty of anything. The perpetrator said he could use a coffee. The younger employee got angry right away and the older one looked at the perpetrator seriously. Decough, since I didn't sleep. Haha, smiled the asshole. What is this, a coffee shop? You think we caught you on a blind date? Shouted the younger police officer. The criminal smiled stupidly and said he would leave when they had coffee. You want to take a break too, don't you? He said while the cops looked at him. The prosecutor told the younger guy to go out and get some strong coffee because they had a long night ahead of them. The criminal smiled sweetly and cheered, "Will there be coffee, Mr. Prosecutor?" The prosecutor smirked and told the criminal not to worry about him. They were being watched by a clerk behind the glass wall that every interrogation room has. This punk's trying to get away with blaming the victim again. Is that she's a whore? Said the watcher. It looks like he's tricky. We gave up on him last time, but now someone showed up and we caught him. The younger clerk continued as he entered the room. 124. And now that he's caught that difficult man, he's done. All we have to do is wait. They continued to talk, but the prosecutor still sat in his seat and looked seriously at the criminal, who was still playing dumb. 47 hours later, a heartbreaking scream was heard at the same police station. Sleepy investigators lazily repositioned themselves. It was that perp yelling. It was like he was going crazy. It was me. It was me who committed the crime. Mr. Investigator. Please get me out of here. Oh, no. Get this prosecutor out. Knocked the man on the glass of the observation room. A younger employee ran into the interrogation room. What happened? As we expected, he recorded with a hidden camera and threatened the victim with it. Coldly replied the prosecutor while the perpetrator was still yelling. A laptop video in the storage unit of a neighbor's girlfriend's youngest daughter's second sister. The prosecutor continued and the sleepy investigators didn't understand the chain at all. As the prosecutor was about to, his phone rang. While the prosecutor was answering the call, the perpetrator was already being escorted out and kept yelling, "How can there be a man like him? Is he real? He hasn't slept or eaten in 2 days. He just asked when? Where? What? How? What? Damn persistent son of a bitch." The criminal continued to yell, hiding his voice. So he asked all sorts of things. The green-jacketed investigator smiled. "What are we going to do when Prosecutor Hio goes to Seoul?" The second investigator said tiredly. "He will end war service very fast," replied the smiling man. The one in the jacket. "He's a little scary, but he's good at his job." The older investigator spoke tiredly. "A little scary? He's scary." "Really? I'm scared to death." The perpetrator started yelling and the investigator in the jacket ordered him to shut up. The prosecutor received a call from Lee Yul. He didn't realize who Lee Yul was at once, so he asked so briefly and rudely. Lee Yul just asked what he was going to do today. And Prosecutor Hio, not expecting such a question, surprised, wide-eyed, "What?" His voice froze in an unfinished question. "Hello? It's Lee Yul," the girl's voice rang out. Prosecutor Hio was so surprised by her call that he couldn't say anything but a raspy, "What? Do you know a lawyer named Jun Kirian? He's pretty famous, he's been on TV lately." The girl babbled as the prosecutor walked out into the parking lot. "We were in the same department of the university, he is my alumnus." "Why?" Someone answered the pensive prosecutor. Lee Yul asked if they had been in contact lately and Prosecutor Hio replied that they had not. "I see, where are you now?" the girl asked cheerfully, holding the phone to her cheek, and the prosecutor again didn't know what to say. "What?" Night had fallen and the prosecutor was driving in his car. He was still as nearly emotionless and collected. From the courtyard, Lee Yul was looking out for him. She was actively waiting for him. The prosecutor noticed her right away. It was chilly and Lee Yul exhaled steam as she ran to meet the prosecutor's car. Her eyes glowed with beauty and cuteness when she looked at him. The prosecutor was just sitting in his car, thinking about something. Just as suddenly, Lee Yul fell down on a flat spot. Prosecutor Hio was very excited for the girl, even jumping up and down in his seat. He quickly got out of the car and ran towards Lee Yul. He bent over her excitedly and asked quietly, touching her, if she was okay. Lee Yul, on the other hand, was incredibly angry as she was not used to this young, foolish body, so much that she seemed to be shrouded in darkness. Even the brave prosecutor was frightened by her aura. "You're too weak and you're already panting from the short run, and you're shivering from the cold. Be careful," Lee Hio said as he threw his coat over her. Lee Yul was drowning in his coat because of their different builds and looked like a bat. It was very surprising the prosecutor and he couldn't look away for a while. Lee Yul was very uncomfortable and Hyo turned away and smiled. Let's hurry up. Buckling up, Lee Yul commanded. Where are we? Asked the somewhat confused prosecutor. Start going, we have no time. Lee Yul pointed her finger forward in a businesslike manner and the prosecutor silently started the car. By the way, thanks for the coat. The girl smiled sweetly. I have a lot of evening gowns. But I can't wear them because my figure doesn't like it. She continued talking until they were already on the road. What happened to your favorite horse? The prosecutor asked gaily, politely. Lee Yul didn't understand which horse he was talking about, so the prosecutor clarified, your silver sedan. But the girl still didn't understand. Did she really have a car? I can't drive for a while. That you also said you have business in Seoul. Nervously giggling said Lee Yul. I don't have any, but you said I should go there. Hyo's reply was short and to the point. Lee Yul was very nervous. What, me? He's being so hard on his fiancée. Turned away and angrily thought the girl. Are they in a political marriage? Between the chairman's daughter and the poor prosecutor? Lee Yul cringed at the thought. She turned around to Hyo and gave a friendly smile and then asked regarding Yoon Kirian, where does he usually go? At this time, probably in his office. He's been filming a lot lately, so? Probably working overtime. Hyo replied dryly as he continued to keep his eyes on the road. Lee Yul asked where his office was located. Hyo replied that he was in the Yaksum area. And Lee Yul cheerfully said they had to go there. Hyo was at a loss. What? Why? The night was incredibly cold. The wind was strong. The two of them had already gotten out of the car and were busily standing next to the building. Lee Yul was still wearing Hyo's coat and he was wearing his jacket. They stopped outside the Kiriang law firm. She's been contacting him since last year, but he never replied. Said Lee Yul in a whisper referring to Yuri Yoon. Of course, she knew it wouldn't be easy, because he'd be a nobleman. Lee Yul continued with her head bowed. Training recruits may seem like nothing, but he really cares about it. Said the girl gathering her wits. But the chairman, he said. Father. It's so because our company is competing in various aspects with our competitor, iRoom Shopping. Already speaking loudly and confidently, Lee Yul was looking at Hyo. Last year, he was also very careful in choosing a coach for the recruits. Actively waving her hands, Lee Yul and Hyo looked at her. She was cute in his big coat. I rushed to Seoul thinking it was a serious matter, but, sighed Hyo while Yul in the background was still preparing as if for a fight. All her prosecutor had to do was just accept it. I'm not close to the older boy. Said Hyo, but Lee Yul was unyielding. I'll take care of it. You're just helping to organize our meeting. Said the girl smilingly. He is not to be taken lightly. Looking at Hyo's girlfriend. That's not true, she thought and said she understood. After that, Lee Yul was like pushing her husband to walk in front of her, covering her like a true gentleman. They were like a couple of dogs of different sizes. 1 hour later, they reached the Kula was Lee Yul needed. The funny kid Yoon who was? The older man asked if they were getting married soon and Hyo said it wasn't time yet. They came to the car where the girl was squatting, and Hyo said that she was a child, and always had been. Lee Yul was very engrossed in something on her phone and didn't even notice the two approaching her. So what? She's cute and alive. Pilo elbowed Hyo's friend. But she wasn't talkative before. The future husband-to-be stretched out thoughtfully. The chairman likes you. Yuri Uni tried to contact you, so they were disappointed when you didn't respond. It will be beneficial to you if this event is successful. I hope you will speak clearly at the training. We will never forget your generosity, Lee Yul quickly and clearly babbled while the two of them couldn't even get a word in edgewise. You're here from the West District Attorney's office? You knew I didn't like being a tutor, but you asked me anyway. You seem very determined. I hope we get along well. Said the smiling guy. That the court bribe case is illegal and worrisome. Hyo said indifferently. Why is our relationship already at the stage where we ask each other unpleasant things? Waving off with a smile replied Yoon to him. Lee Yul looked at Lee Sungkyung's profile. She looked at the profile picture for a very long time. Afterward, the girl was still typing something else very quickly. Suddenly she heard, "Give me my phone back to sleep," and looked up at Hyo. He looked at her without any emotion aside from the visible suspicion in his blue eyes. You were in the same university department as the announcer Lee Sunjeong. Do you have her contact? Cheerfully and with a smile, Lee Yul said while jumping up. She merrily covered herself with Hyo's huge coat and laughed without wanting for anything to return. Morning was coming and the sky was already glowing with the scarlet rays of dawn. The great hall of the house had both a piano and a magnificently huge library. In the hall sat the chairman reading the morning paper and drinking flavored coffee. He was still in his pajamas. Li Yol looked out from the corner. "You woke up really early. Did you stay up all night?" The man asked and Li Yol just nodded her head smiling. He asked if she wanted to help him get ready for work. Li Yol was happy. "Can I?" And he said he'd be grateful. The girl broke out into a smile and hesitated again. "Okay, chairman, oh dear." The chairman was only glad she called him that. And so they went to a place in the large dressing room. Li Yol was surprised to see so many beautiful clothes of the chairman. But especially her attention was drawn to the watches, or rather their large collection. She stared at them as if mesmerized. He asked Li Yol to choose a watch for him and she smiled embarrassedly at him. "Okay." In her mind, she was embarrassed that they looked like recently married spouses. Yol smiled silently as she put the watch on his hand. She raised her beautiful shining eyes to him. The chairman shone with happiness as if the sun itself and smiled without holding back. "It's so early in the morning and the sun is already up." Yol covered herself with her hands. The man was stroking his daughter's head when suddenly someone spoke up. "Li Yol." It was her father who said he was going to work too and maybe she would like to help him too. The man and Li Yol must not have been very happy that their reunion had been interrupted. This boy doesn't like anyone touching his stuff. So let it be. Just help your father, come on my little boy. Hurriedly spoke the father leading his daughter away. "Yes, father," stretched Yol sadly. Yol looked around the other dressing room and couldn't figure out where his clothes were. "Which one would be suitable for me to wear, my little one?" seriously asked the father looking at his daughter. Yol found the costume racks. But they were all exactly the same. "It's overcast today, so you'd better wear a brightly colored suit, right?" Dad smiled. "I think this suit is a little brighter." She picked up the suit at random. Li Yol is very lucky. She's loved by everyone. She must have been born with a lot of luck. The girl thought of her new life as she handed the suit to her father. "If this is the way it's always gonna be, we'll have to play my heart out before I'm a liar again." Smiling enigmatically, the girl remembered the guy in the morning. The girl helped her father with the choice and almost calling him by his last name offered the choice. "It seems that this one will fit better with the chosen suit." The father admired his daughter's choice and asked if she wanted to wear the tie on him. Suddenly someone approached them. I think it was Dad's wife, but for some reason she wasn't happy about it and asked why they're so happy early in the morning. Li Yol and her father were shocked and confused. Afterward, the stern woman immediately left. The girl hesitated and got a little frustrated. "Looks like I made a lot of noise, but Li Yuri shouldn't exaggerate." Li Yol found the wine department in the pantry. There was so much wine and it was very expensive. Li Yol looked at the shelves littered with various splendid wines and drooled. Everything was elegant and clean. This house had everything. Just as suddenly, the girl heard a conversation in the kitchen. "Kimchi soup. Ms. Yol eats a lot if she eats kimchi soup. It's too much. If she leaves, who's gonna eat it then? Will Ms. Yol be leaving soon? The maid is talking to that wicked woman at home. I don't know. I think she's gonna be gone pretty soon. By the way, she used to barely eat, but now she's really eating a lot. She's obsessed?" The old woman kept saying mean things. Yol stood there and listened to all this. She jokingly thought, and how does she know that? The day was in full swing. The sun was shining brightly and warming the air well. Wow, look at her hands. She's so talented. Yl was making heart-shaped cookies and someone admired her very much. "When did you learn to cook like this? From the looks of it, it's already delicious. Seeing that you eat so much, it seems like the food we've been cooking all this time isn't to your taste, isn't it?" I admire the young woman's head. Yol more and more. Kim confirmed that Mrs. Lee's food is indeed bland. Yol and the woman turned on Kim as if she had said something truly scary. "Mr. C. It turns out OPPA really likes appetizers." Yol stammered again. "The first son of this house really likes appetizers." Smiling confirmed the woman helping with the cooking. The kitchen of this house was large, cozy, and clean. Kim was leaving for the other room. "In the past. Did I not live here? My memories are still hazy." Yol asked awkwardly. "When Miss went to college, she had already moved out of here. Doesn't Miss remember being offered a place to live? On your own?" The woman asked surprised. "After Miss left on her own. We thought Miss was living. All right, but later Miss didn't want to leave the house. This made the chairman worry, murmured the assistant. Didn't want to leave the house. Yul felt like she'd been stabbed. She wants to live one more than sitting at home. Thought Yul of the past owner of this body stacking cookies. I appreciate that your atmosphere has really changed from the past. But, would you like to leave again? The assistant asked smilingly. What? Yul interjected. I like it here, but ma'am. MOM doesn't think I'm comfortable here. Yul replied thoughtfully. Silently, she spun the cookies together. The love of the one who cared for you and raised you is greater than the one who gave birth to you. And even so, the love between mistress and mistress is indeed deeper than it seems. The assistant said smilingly. Yunji, shouted Kim upon hearing this when we get back to the kitchen. Kim told Benjai to just do her job and not say useless things. It seems that this family is not harmonious. There must be a reason why the situation in this family is the way it is. Yul thought about everything. Well, of course, every family has problems. This will be over quickly if I hurry back to my original body. But right now, it's all about spreading the word that the lawyer was able to find an outside tutor. She bagged the cookies. There's no way the husky prosecutor is going to say it's all thanks to him, is there? Thought Yul, quickly stomping off somewhere. She came to someone's work with these cookies. But the man wasn't there. Outside the door, she heard someone's voice. Covering the door, she peered inside the room. What she saw there shocked Yul and she couldn't say a word. And so Yul decided to look into the room. She opened the door and saw someone. She saw Secretary Yun shaking and decided to call her by name. The secretary turned around wiping her tears and asked if Yul had come to see the CEO. Yul immediately approached and asked what happened to Secretary Yun, and she replied that nothing happened while continuing to wipe her tears. Yul looked at Yun with eyes full of empathy. And Secretary Yun stared back and could barely hold back her tears. To be honest, I think the accident was my fault. Suppressedly thought Secretary Yun. But she said, thank God everything's okay, with tears in her eyes while squeezing out a smile. Yul watched Secretary Yun's agony and mental theosis. Secretary Yun immediately started apologizing for the scene, and Yul told her that there was nothing to apologize for and timidly reached out to her. Yun began to torture herself further with the fact that she shouldn't have told Yuri to go to the roof, but tried to reassure herself that she would get better soon and everything would be fine. Yeah, right, she held herself up by her skirt with trembling hands. Secretary Yun fell to her knees and cried hard, I hope Yuri comes back. Yul, who was Yuri, was extremely worried about her colleague but couldn't tell her anything. Yul was starting to cry herself. And asked Yun not to cry so bitterly. Suddenly, Yul yelled as she gathered her wits. And said, I'm Yuri. Then once again she repeated louder, I'm Yuri. Yun abruptly stopped crying in surprise. What? The girl wiping her tears, I said I'm Yuri not Yul, and the secretary was still sitting on the floor. Yun picked at her tears and said, yes Ms. Yul, because Yuri and Yul have similar pronunciation in Korea. The girl cried hard and screamed, no, I'm not Yul. I'm Yuri. Yun sitting on the floor looked at the girl. Yes Ms. Yul I know, she said lowering her gaze. The girl was getting quite nervous and tried to explain somehow that she was Yuri. Yun was growing more and more surprised and seemed to be starting to realize what she was talking about. Is there anyone besides me who knows that you work here to follow your first love? You work here to follow Deputy Planning Director Kim Il-sang, right? I've never forgotten how proud you were when you both went on vacation after dating. Yuri said in a businesslike manner. She also recalled Yun praising him for his reliability since he had booked a 5-star hotel. He quickly picked me up and threw me on the bed. He kissed me several times. I was very, she said word for word like Yun that day. You described it in such detail that I almost threw up. Yuri added with a grin. Yun was still sitting on the floor and was in a totally shocked. But after that bastard says he's married an advocate. For 4 days and 3 nights I stopped you from coming at him with a knife. Continued to say Yun's parody then, I will kill you. And how she literally held her down by force, too, I remember. They stabbed the knife so hard into the wall then that it wouldn't come out, and Yun joked that it was an Excalibur sword. Yun covered her mouth with her hands in surprise. And after the wedding, he tried to seduce you again. You almost fell in love with him again, and I had to restrain you for another 4 days and 3 nights. Already irritated, Yuri recalled, and Yun jumped up from the floor in surprise. Yuri also remembered calling that creep's wife. And remembered how that lawyer came into the office looking for Yun shouting, so this is the you. and how that woman wanted to splash water on Yoon. And as Yuri approached her again, she put water in her glass for the same purpose. Yoon immediately lit up. So you told her? You had an affair with a married man. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Screamed Yuri in Yeol's body. Yoon didn't want to believe this whole narrative of impossible. What other? Yuri wanted to convince her. You once ordered an adult product to the office, she said without lowering her tone, and Yoon squeaked. The package was addressed to the office, but it was actually an adult product. I got suspicious and started searching. Yuri continued in the body of a young girl. What did you buy then? Asked cheerfully Yuri in full parcel information in the phone. Yoon shouted, Stop! Stop! Tilting her head back and screaming at the top of her voice. Yuri decided to annihilate Yoon with information and said she also saw the folders in her notebook. Yoon was choked to the bone. Yuri remembers how her eyes are on the names of the folders in Yoon's computer made my brow furrow. And just from the titles of the videos, it's clear that Yoon has very diverse tastes. Yoon was shocked and frightened by what this young lady who went by the name of Yuri was saying. Yoon even turned pale at the whole thing. Yuri, however, looked at her and gloated. Giggled. Through the company building, cries of denial from the unfortunate Yoon could be heard. What's the time in Kajakstan? Warden's office. Long time no see, Da Hyo. Have you finished packing? We'll have a hard time without you. When you're here, our performance increasing rapidly, said one of the three present. The man with the glasses looked at the prosecutor with kind eyes. So be it. The strict aunt thing is tough, huh? I heard she's untraceable. Even though you firmly said you'd finish this case before you returned to Seoul? The two men spoke while the prosecutor stared silently and stared in front of him. One of the men asked if Hyo would send him an invitation when he got married. The prosecutor was about to say something in response, but he was interrupted by another man who laughed and offered to go to Seoul together when Hyo sent an invitation. On the way out, the man with glasses asked the prosecutor about the trap for the strict aunt and asked Hyo to make it better, because she had done a lot of things. The man smilingly asked him to remember to send the wedding invitation. Hyo decided not to say anything in response. About marriage, Hyo said quietly to the empty hallway. He drew his eyebrows together pitifully and fell silent. It's a dessert that comes from Europe. Once again, the young lady's room is full of a variety of sweets. Yuri, who is now Yeol, decided to try the French candy macarons. But the flavor didn't live up to the hype and they weren't decently sweet. Miss Yeol, are you still having fun in this situation? Excitedly asked Yoon, and Yeol replied that it was all from never having a chance to rest once she started working. Yeol also said she likes what's going on right now. Yoon began to ask about whether she wanted to be in this body and where its master was now. What are you going to do if Lee Yeol will come back? That question puzzled Yuri. Yuri calmly replied that in that case, she could finally return to her body. Yoon was silent, but her face showed that she was very anxious. Yuri took a quick glance at Yoon. Don't worry, Yooni. Instead, I'm happy because I can pretend to be a millionaire's daughter. Well, the only downside to that is that I can't have freedom since everyone worries about me. The girl said cheerfully. And she remembered how a father wants to teach his favorite daughter money every time with sparkling love. And dear brother took away all her electronic devices on the pretext that electronic waves might interfere with memory recovery. And if she wants to eat something, it's probably already prepared for her. It was her personal paradise with some inaccuracies. Yoon said it really should be enjoyable. Yuri sat up to her and reiterated once again that there was really no reason to worry and Yoon had nowhere to go. Yuri started to coo and joke and Yoon was jokingly angry. Suddenly, Yuri said that out of emotion. Her ears hurt, and at that time Yoon said that since she couldn't find Lee Yuri's cell phone, she bought a new one and she could use it. Yoon held out the phone to Yuri. Yoon said that this phone would only be for emergencies so that it wouldn't be taken away because of Lee Yeol's health concerns. Suddenly, Yoon started asking Yuri about Prosecutor Hyo. Yoon assumed she really liked him even though she never talked about him. Yoon also suggested that Lee Yeol's father insisted on the marriage. The girl was embarrassed and said that the prosecutor seemed to be against the marriage between them. Yuri also said that when she met Lee Yeol on the rooftop, she looked like she wanted to stop it all. Yoon kept insisting that Yeol was in love with the prosecutor and if it wasn't for the accident they would have gotten married afterward. Yuri, however, was disturbed by such assumptions of her friend. Yuri thought about it, it's not like they have feelings for each other. It's obvious, the girl kept telling herself. Yuri imagined it was her work project. These two are completely mismatched and her goal is to tell them apart. Yoon, on the other hand, went on to say that Prosecutor Hyo is generally trying to take care of Lee Yul. Weren't my predictions right, fretted Yuri. Yoon immediately realized that Yuri had messed up. And Yuri began to suffer from the thought of ruining someone's perfect marriage. Yoon saw Yuri turn gray and wanted to know what was wrong and what happened, but the girl didn't resuscitate. Yul, please hurry back. And again a new day, and again the premises of Kajakson. It was the office of Prosecutor Hyo and his co-owner. The secretary was putting cookies and tea on the table. Lee Yul went to a close acquaintance's house for lunch, and his secretary started praising the prosecutor and his methods of getting the right information to solve crimes. The man, on the other hand, parodied the look on the prosecutor's face during the interrogation. Lee Yul was startled by the similarity. The two of them started to melt like butter in the sun from how cute Hyo is when he's serious during his work. And Yuri, in Yul's body, still pictured Hyo as a cheekless husky with a cold stare. They quickly switched to praise Lee Yul and how delicious the cookies she made and how responsible she was in how they were conveniently packaged to bring them. After Yul finished her tale of cookie dipping, the two of them began to melt into a "what's wrong with these people" kind of mirth again. Yul decided to ask directly if Prosecutor Hyo has women flirting with him. Hyo, if I understand correctly, this is the woman he met on a blind date when he was still going through the education, the man said. Nonsense. He only went there because he was tricked by his elder. Be careful what you say. A woman pushed him. Lee Yul calmed them down and said that everything was fine and that she just wanted to settle all her problems before her marriage to Mr. Hyo. These two didn't know what Yul was talking about, what kind of chaos and trouble. At that moment, someone entered the room. Yul and the two of them snickered with interest. Hyo's cold eyes looked at them. The two of them quickly gathered up the bags of cookies and started walking away while Hyo waited with a serious look on his face for them to leave. He looked at Yul even more seriously. She smiled sweetly and said she was waiting for him here while he got off work. Hyo sat down at the table and asked her what her business was. Lee Yul made an extremely cute face and said that she came here because she wanted to tell him something. She was so practiced at smiling so sweetly that it would work on even someone so serious. He interrupted her efforts and said briefly, "So talk." Lee Yul started to worry. "It's not something you can say right away," but Hyo said to say it straight. Yuri was immediately upset because she thought that this man had feelings for Lee Yul since he came to Seoul when she asked him, but Lee Yul pulled herself together. "Okay. Why do you hate me?" the girl asked seriously. Hyo was surprised by such a question and didn't immediately find an answer. "You hate me, don't you? If that's the case, then let's." Lee Yul continued with a serious look while the prosecutor was silent. "Married to the score," groaned the girl across the table with the palms of her hands. "They say OPPA will be transferred to Seoul? They say our wedding will be sooner? Seems like we need to hurry up, since we only have a few weeks left," whispered the girl leaning over to Hyo. She made a scary, "let's live happily ever after" face. The look on her face made Hyo tense up and she continued, "and in peace." Still the same office and a beautiful early warm spring day. Lee Yul looked at Hyo fearfully and with a smirk, "Let's live happily and in peace," then she mentally added, "because Lee Yul likes you." She smiled sweetly and thought about making things the way they were before the accident. She knew he was going to run away from her, but she wasn't going to let that happen. After all, Lee Yuri was not an ordinary person in her time. She has 13 years of experience as an employee. It's already fashionable to equate that with the experience of a valiant warrior. Hyo looked at her. "What are you going to?" At that moment they were interrupted by someone opening the door abruptly. It was those two and shouted in one voice, "Mr. Prosecutor, there's a strict anti-da." The prosecutor was immediately put off by this news. Lee Yul didn't understand which side ant they were talking about. The three of them immediately seriously started discussing the course of action while Lee Yul sat silent in surprise. Hyo prosecutor. Mun Yongwi suddenly appeared and made a ruckus. Ran into the room some more one anxious employee. Hyo gave the guy a businesslike nod and the two men behind him smiled slyly. "She came on instantly when we heard rumors that she'd been transferred to a new DA. She's very quick to gather information. Is that why she wants to get ahead of US?" The two smilingly continued their discussion. Lee Yul was still misunderstood and Hyo was calmly drinking tea. She was still thinking, "What's with the strict auntie? What's going on?" And she looked at the calm Hyo. These two ran back into the room and said, "Should we call an ambulance?" Prosecutor Hyo calmly stood up and nodded his head. He strode confidently out of the room and approached the woman who was already lying on the floor surrounded by frightened employees. Hyo quietly walked over to her and stared at her. There was a woman in her late teens lying on the floor with her mouth closed and her eyes rolling back and shaking. Prosecutor Hyo looked at this woman with all the severity of his nature. Lee Yul anxiously looked around and didn't understand why no one was calling a doctor. You don't need to call an ambulance. Inspector Hong will be here soon. Let's get ready to meet him, said Hyo, leaving the room. Your condition doesn't look good, so let's do a medical examination, said the prosecutor as he sat down at his desk. He ordered an arrest warrant. All the staff nervously stood and watched the events unfold. The woman stopped shaking. Leaning on her arms, the old woman rose from the floor and yelled, "What are you looking at? It's not a free show." All of the staff immediately closed the room with Lee Yul. Who is this aunt? Asked Yul to an employee. She's committed 17 frauds. She's as slippery as an eel, but now she's been caught. After she did something terrible, replied the woman with a serious tone. At this time, 2 other workers were already trying to quiet this aunt. She got caught by the Hyo prosecutor, and now she's really finished. Almost in a whisper, the scarred employee said. Lee Yul mentally called Hyo a Siberian husky again. And he is the best in this field, thought Yali Yul, remembering in her head Hyo. While everyone was distracted by the howling of that evil criminal aunt, Yul was thinking that she had come at the wrong time. Is there really a new plan? Yul started to leave and thought to look in the principal's secret room. Someone's phone is ringing. It was Yoon, and she was texted by Lee Yul. Is she really going to Jeonju? Yoon thought while looking at her phone. And she remembered how a few days ago they had discussed her desire to cancel the wedding because of Prosecutor Hyo's cold face. They say there is nothing more troublesome than an unimpressive husband, said Yul softly. Prosecutor Hyo is your husband? He usually has a blank face. Yoon shouted to her. They looked like a mother and a naughty daughter. Yuri knew she had to make things right and do things the way they used to be. She said it would be considered a gift for cutie Yul, and Yoon wondered how she was going to arrange it. Yuri took a sexy pose as she thought and said to do everything with the help of her charisma. The girl already imagined the prosecutor falling head over heels in love. Yoon thought Yuri was joking because she had never dated before. Yuri was suddenly sickened by those words. Suddenly, all her confidence in the plan went sour. Yoon just walked away when Yuri was backed into a corner and panicked about what she would do in whatever situation she was in. And she went to Cheongju to settle this matter? Looking at Yoon's phone, Lee Yul sent Yoon a photo of the beautiful view of the village and said she was already there to take care of things. She also posted selfies and wrote that for the sake of Plan B, she's now walking through this village. Yul kept sending pictures of her walking and smiling. She took incredibly beautiful pictures. Yoon looked at the photos and jokingly thought that they made Yul look like a news anchor and that she had gone to that village just to relax. Yoon was furious because she wanted to know if Yul had asked Hyo to marry her and what he said. She started typing that the real Lee Yul Domested, why are you going back and forth there? Yoon was very angry. What are you doing with another person's body? Are you crazy? Just as suddenly, someone walked into the room. Secretary Yoon came in. Yoon peppily turned around. It was Yul's brother. What did you say? Another person's body? He was extremely surprised and even a little scared. What did you say? Another man's body? The chairman asked cautiously. Yoon was startled by his appearance and hid the phone behind her back. No, nothing. But I heard you went straight home. The secretary smiled nervously. It's because my schedule ended faster. If it's the park secretary, he's already gone home. Please make me a cup of tea. The tea I had recently was delicious, the chairman said in a businesslike manner. Yoon smiled and said she would make it now. Chairman's office. He sits embarrassed with his hands folded in front of him. Yoon placed a cup of the very same tea on the table. It sounds like the work you're doing now isn't going very well. Our legal team isn't that bad. Did the prosecutor reject your proposal? Said Yoon. He said he was going to go to his hometown and open a law office, replied the chairman, pulling back his tie. Even so, we have to find him before the Hackeon kicks in. I'm working on it, he said sadly. Chief Lee Haekyung is the third son of the chairman who returned to Korea last year because he got bad grades while working in an overseas branch. After that, if he appears in public, he simply strikes back at his acquaintance. He blew up these people, leaving nothing behind. He just destroyed their lives. Strangely, The chairman of the board gets furious if the CEO makes a small mistake. Never say anything to Chief Lee. Asked the chairman to his secretary. Yoon found it difficult to look into the chairman's eyes and she sighed heavily. Lawyer Jun Kirian, the one that's popular now, is also in this place. He tells funny stories too, you know. He smiled. I heard he responded to our invitation to be a mentor from outside the company this time? Yoon clarified. He said if the lawyer tried hard to call him. Quietly the man replies. I felt uncomfortable after I heard that Yuri had an accident, but he said it was Lee Yul who told Prosecutor Hyo to meet with him. The chairman continued. He took a tea bag out of his cup. He looked at Yoon with clear eyes and said that she already knows about the affairs in their family because she always talks to Yul. Truth, every single time she comes to the office to request a benefit, she has always come to Mr. Hyo's home on his order. The secretary nervously replied. The chairman looked away and fell silent with a serious look. He mentally told himself that Yul never changes, running his fingers over. She always watches her environment and feels her lonely. He began to recall how much she loved being alone. I think maybe she would have been a little different if her mom had sent her earlier. I can't believe a kid like that told Professor Hyo to go to Seoul to meet lawyer Yoon. Said the chairman smiling gently. He turned to Yoon, she's amazing isn't she? Yoon smiled and said that she did. So they went on to talk about some of the working points. And in the village at that time it was already late at night. Many people were sitting on the veranda of the restaurant. Yuri and Yul's body was also there. She was drinking something with flavor. The girl tasted good. She drank a traditional Korean alcoholic drink and was happy. Korean seafood pancake. Pujin and mollusky were also very much to her liking. The girl was filled with joy and merriment. But at the same moment became serious like Hyo. This body was young and did not take well to alcohol and large amounts of food. The girl even got upset. There lies before me an incomparable splendor of food flavor, but why can't I eat it? I just ate a spoonful of all these foods. Just a spoonful. Yuri mentally resented. She looked down at her full end. Bloated belly and he gurgled. She was angry because why would she need so much money if she couldn't eat it all? The girl looked ridiculous while she was angry. Afterward, she sighed heavily. Her eyes filled with tears. My little ones, she fell on the table with her hands near the food and cried. Yuri visualized Yoon appearing in front of her, ta damn. Avatar Yoon said we'll take a break to learn more about Yul. Lee Yul's biological mother gave her daughter away when she was 10. The chairman and his 2 sons were surprised but accepted her. Yoongra was angry and Haven was meekly silent. This case happened the same year you joined the company. Coincidentally, there was a fire at the Ikkian factory, so little was known about Lee Yul. Avatar Yoon spoke. Unless that at that moment we were talking about the love of the mother who born and those who care. Remembered Yuri of the conversation in the kitchen. Yuri thought about why Yul was told to get married at such a young age if everyone loved her so much. And reached for the food. If I were Lee Yul, she wondered. Oh, forget it, she said to herself and shook her head. I hope I can tame the husky and Lil Yul will be happy. But because of the sudden appearance of an ant? Yuri thought sadly with her head thrown back. What is it? Distracted by Yuri. It seems that Lee Yul is also weak to alcohol. Since I've been drinking, my head feels like it's spinning. She stared at the moon that was blurring in its light. She was quite drunk but told herself she'd take one more sip and leave. Just one more sip, she convinced her body. Suddenly someone snatched the cup from her. She was so drunk she didn't see that her precious drink had been taken and drunk by Prosecutor Hyo. Hyo took a loud gulp of alcohol. Lee Yul looked in his direction but didn't immediately recognize him. She saw a familiar coat. Hyo loudly placed the fasting cup on the table. And sat down in front of the girl in a businesslike and serious manner. Siberian Zasky? Thought Yuri looking at the prosecutor and trying to recognize him. Yuri tried to see with blurred eyes who it was. Is that a Siberian husky? She looked at Hyo who sat down in front of her and watched intently. Yuri took him by the cheeks and was glad to see him here at this hour. She thought he had already gone home, but he was still here. Hyo seemed like Yoon had told that Yul was in a place that was famous for its marketing. Yul started laughing. Oh, so you're talking to Yoon? Hyo looked at the table in silence. On it stood a multitude of dishes. He looked at Lee Yul just as silently. Yul was leaning and trying to keep the net and was drunk. He asked if she was serious this afternoon. Lee Yul asked what he was talking about. Hyo with a serious look began to speak. But Yul interrupted him with, "What are you talking about marriage? Is it so hard to say it straight? What did you think I was kidding?" Parodying his seriousness, she said. "Well, good," Hyo replied briefly, looking at her. Yul was confused. Did he just agreed to? She asked loudly, "Are you really gonna marry me?" Hyo flicked her forehead and said, "I didn't say that." Yuri didn't realize he was playing hot and cold with Yul? He said he didn't hate her because she asked him that this morning. "But to the question of marriage I have not yet given an answer," he said without emotion. Yuri in Yul's body got angry. "Oh, that guy." But suddenly Hyo said that he would definitely think about it seriously. Yuri even glared at that answer. "Wait, what?" Hyo again defiantly drank her much-loved alcohol from the same cup. Yuri saw a small tear trickle down his chin. "So you should think about it, too, and seriously," he said, setting down his empty cup. Yuri cried out seriously, "What else is there to think about? Of course I love you." Hyo seriously interjected, "Love?" He pretended he didn't know what she was talking about, and Yuri was surprised that he was embarrassed. He began to remember the first time he was at Chairman Lee's house and the first time he saw Yul. And how nervous he was to see her and couldn't help but stare. Like Lee's father said about how everything is in the DA's office. And how he noticed her again. And how she ran away again when he wanted to talk to her. How she hid behind the curtain out of fear and he was looking for her. How he told her they couldn't talk if she kept running away from him like that. He said he liked her aloofness, and Yuri in Yul's body couldn't find the words for a coherent response. "First of all, you have to be healthy," said Hyo, and Yul replied, "I'm great healthy now." "Crazy?" Hyo interjected. "Healthy, very healthy," replied Yul without emotion. He asked if she was going to finish her studies. Yuri remembered that Yul had dropped out of school before the accident. "Don't sit at home. You must at least go shopping or go out with friends," said Yahyo worriedly. Yul smiled awkwardly and laughed, rubbing her head. And Hyo told her to think about what she really wanted. He was worried about the girl and wanted her to be happy. Yul understood his concern. And began to smile as she practiced. She turned her charm on full. "That's why I'm here." Hyo was embarrassed. "Yeah, sure." He decided to walk the girl back to where she was staying. "Can you walk?" he asked the worried Hyo to the girl who was holding on to his hand and staggering. She said, "Of course," but she was understandable. When she wanted to say she was fine, her leg twisted. Hyo gently picked up the girl with one hand. He put his arm around Yul's waist and they looked into each other's eyes without saying anything. Hyo started to reach out to kiss his Yul. Yul pulled away and changed the subject to, "Who exactly was that aunt this afternoon?" She was surprised that he wanted to kiss her. She also asked how he realized she was faking fainting. Hyo replied that he realized it because their eyes met. They walked on without holding each other, and Hyo talked about how he'd figured out and caught that evil aunt and how easy it had been not to fall for her provocations. And about why she was called the bad aunt, because in the old picture she was wearing tight tiger-colored tights. Yul imagined what she might look like in that photo, like a dangerous tiger. This made the girl laugh very loudly. At the same moment, Yul fell down. She fell with her whole body to the ground and didn't get up. This made the girl start to tumble bitterly. Hyo thought that she thought we had already arrived, but that wasn't the case. Yul was in too much pain and too heavy. That very second he lifted the girl up and she calmed down. He put her on his back and asked her to relax, because she couldn't even bend her legs with excitement. He added that they would both be more comfortable if she relaxed her body. Yul said she would try. Wow, dialogue, she thought. He asked her why she drank to such a state, but Yuri thought only of the fact that for the first time in her life her boyfriend was carrying her on his back and that it was very comfortable. She leaned against him and relaxed. "He smells so good," thought the girl, blushing. He walked easily towards the house. She relaxed completely and trusted Hyo, almost falling asleep on his back. Seon's apartment in Jeonju. He turned on the lights in the apartment, almost on the top floor. Hyo lay down on the bed. Yul, who was already fast asleep. He leaned over her, leaning on his hands. Hyo looked at her sweet face of sleeping beauty. He started to take off her coat and she didn't even wake up. Next he took off his socks. Hyo neatly stole Yul away with a blanket. But Lu decided in her dream that she didn't need it and immediately threw it off. Hyo once again carefully stole her away, still looking at her face with the desire to kiss her. It was already a little past midnight. Hyo lay on the couch and couldn't sleep. He looked up at the ceiling and looked confused. He remembered sitting in a restaurant and the first time they'd had such a long conversation alone, and I thought she couldn't drink alcohol. In many things, pondered the prosecutor. She looks like someone else. With these, Hyo got up from the couch and sat down. Hyo went completely deep into his musings. He remembered all the people he knew telling him all sorts of things about marriage. And how he could choose who he wanted to live with. How they'd suggested he get close to Yeol's family, and how his coworkers at work had told him how wonderful she was, especially after Yeol had brought cookies to them. All these people in the memories were encouraging but also complicated. Hyo shifted from those memories. And he remembered her asking if he hated her. And he mentally replied, I don't hate you, touching his lips, but I don't love you either. At that moment, Hyo heard a hoarse moan from the room where she was sleeping. He walked up the stairs. Yeol? She was lying in bed, panting heavily, her blouse caught in her throat. She coughed and got out of bed. Are you okay? Hyo asked anxiously, leaning over Yeol. She suddenly stopped coughing. Hyo was startled by what she was doing. Yeol started to undo the buttons on her blouse and her underwear was already showing. Hyo Reko turned away. Yeol, she just pulled off her blouse and threw it away. Yeol suddenly grabbed the prosecutor's cheeks with her hands. She pulled him this way and that on her bed closer to her and looked at him. Right in the eye. And at that moment, Yuri kissed him on the cheek. Hyo didn't expect it, or maybe he didn't expect it at all. Yuri started kissing all over his face and Hyo was still in shock and didn't move. And in an instant, Yuri kissed Hyo right on the lips. He couldn't close his eyes because of the surprise. Yuri let go of him and gave him a full smile. The prosecutor was amazed at how she had just spent it and couldn't say a word. After Britannia pulled away and looked at Hyo already suspiciously, holding onto his shoulders. And after Yeol said he looked like a dog. That really pissed Hyo off. After saying that, Yuri plopped down on the bed and snoozed peacefully. Hyo was upset and looked like he was about to cry. He turned around and started to walk away. Is it really her? He thought, frightened. Is it really Yeol? Covering his lips with his hand, he left hurrying towards the couch. He was too embarrassed to leave his common sense behind. It's already a little light. Someone was already in the kitchen of the prosecutor's apartment. Hyo reluctantly covered his face with his hand. He slumped in the living room that was connected to the kitchen where the lights were on and the dishes were clinking and Hyo had to wake up. He saw Yeol in the kitchen, making breakfast. She noticed him. Oh, you're already awake, prosecutor. He smiled at Yuri without taking her eyes off the cooking process. He asked Yeol in surprise why she was nyunging in the middle of the night and cowered on the table. And there were already many fresh and flavorful dishes standing there. Yuri was wearing his t-shirt and said that the food in the fridge was not good and apparently prepared by a chef from her family. That's why she decided to cook it all. She showed him a platter of breaded shrimp and smiled sweetly. He looked at the table in bewilderment and asked Yeol, are you really that much of a people person? She really cooked a lot of things. Yuri only told him to sit down to eat since he was already awake. Yuri said and with a smile said, sit down to eat. Hurry up. Hyo started to say something already. But Yuri interrupted him by yelling, I said eat. Yuri was still very drunk and was telling Hyo to eat more by slipping him shrimp. He ate one, almost sobbing. They say it's not Yeol. It's a new day. And we're at the DA's office. Hyo was in the restroom. He carefully adjusted his tie while looking in the mirror. He walked into the office and was immediately offered food, wondering why he was here. These two employees started suggesting we go to a Chinese restaurant. I like Chinese food? Hyo got very tense at that suggestion. And abruptly started running out of the office. The two men were puzzled. What's wrong with him? He hasn't looked well since this morning. Has he had too much to drink? You think he's gonna show it? He should be fine unless he's been eating tangsuyuk and fried shrimp in the middle of the night. Discussing his behavior were two staff members who already knew him. Hyo really felt bad and angrily thought about Yeol and how she didn't even know that she was causing him suffering now. Jdaeonju station was drowned in the colors of the trees. Hyo and Yeol were standing in a store at the station, and while the girl was choosing souvenirs, Hyo asked why he couldn't take Yeol home. No, it's okay. I like traveling by train, she said, smiling as she picked out her food. Hyo felt bad again and said that Yeol looked good even though she drank last night and slept badly and ate at night. He asked if she suffered from sleepwalking, but Yuri said that when she drank a lot, she was very hungry. Hyo held his head again. Hangover, weird thing, he said, holding back his facial expressions. Yuri was embarrassed because he was probably suffering now because he ate the food she had prepared as if she were drunk and wanted to ask him something. Prosecutor Hyo looked at Yeol. She squinted and called him pro darling and smiled sweetly, trying to distract from the fact that she had stumbled. Hyo was surprised at the nickname. I said darling, didn't I? Yuri was confused. Leaving the store, he told Yul that her food didn't taste bad at all. I've been cooking for you, so you'll marry me soon, won't you? Yul spoke up vigorously. Shut up, said Hyo, closing his eyes. Yuri giggled, covering herself. Oh, right. Bend over please, she asked Hyo. Yuri stood on her tippy toes. Hyo obediently bent over a little. Yuri gently reached her hand toward his head. She snapped at him full on like he'd snapped at her in the restaurant back then. But then she started stroking his hair, which surprised and stunned Hyo even more. She carefully and skillfully redid his morning routine and he obediently stood waiting. Better now, said Yuri as Hyo opened his eyes. Jen was still clear. Yuri was already at the mall in Seoul. The store was lively with female customers and staff walking around. I'll send them to you, miss. You won't be able to carry them all, the saleswoman said excitedly, and Yul replied that she would go very slowly and it would be all right. Yuri looked in her purse and it was almost empty. Oh no, rice cakes are expensive. Yuri asked if they have employee discounts and the salesperson said they do, and the girl bluntly said, I don't have enough money. Is any member of your family an employee of, for example, department store? The salesperson asked politely. My father and all my 3 brothers work here, Yul replied. The salesperson asked for their names. Yuri started listing: Lee Haeung, Lee Haewon, Lee Hakyong. Suddenly, Yoon came up and from the back approached Yul and asked loudly, Are you having fun? Yul was startled by this tone and Yoon's sudden appearance. Sajin Yooni, nice smile. Yul tried to hide the fact that she was nervous. Leslie Yul, the CEO is very angry, Yoon spoke sternly, and Yul as if she didn't understand what happened. Why? My Yul spent the night at Sangbi's? Angrily the young man looked on. So this punk Songue seduced my Yul to spend the night at his house? He continued, sitting back in his chair. He couldn't bring her home because it was too late? He thought out loud without hiding his anger. He should have brought her home, even if he had to carry her, shouted the young gentleman uncontrollably. It doesn't matter if his home is on Jeju Island or Alungdu Island. He still had to bring her home. He continued to shout at the top of his voice. He must have been planning to attack that child. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have done it. Drunk. I guess the CEO's anger. CEO, please calm down, Yoon said fearfully. He said so, finished Yoon's story. What am I, a child? Yul shouted. She may look like that from the outside, but inside she is more than 30 years old. Ms. Lee Yul is the young miss who fell from the 10th floor a few days ago. Secretary Yoon spoke sternly. Just tell him I'm on duty. Yuri smiled. What duty? Annoyed, Yoon interjected. The duty to take care of the marriage project.